Hi everyone, yeah, welcome back. Good to see you again. You're looking well. Get yourself a drink and a seat up front. We're going to get started. Because yes, there's a show. It's all been happening and now you want to know. But before we can start, we must begin with hello. My name is Sean, your host and fellow. Now grab hold your beverage, your mind just as quick. We're building up for our best sip. So join me now for the greatest pleasure where we unwind this world together. It's time now. It's time for the sip. Let's do it now. Let's do it quick. Go! Ah, yes. Absolutely wonderful. Well, a 36-year-old man named Shiva Krishnabara was arrested after he allegedly lost his mind at a family Easter event inside a shopping mall. While a guy was in full Easter bunny costume, was doing the usual meet and greets with the kids, Bara stormed up to and assaulted the bunny, full-on attacking the costume performer in front of families. Police say it was completely unprovoked. The costume performer was shaken but okay, and Bara was hauled off on assault charges. The mall had to shut down the Easter activities early because of the chaos. Well, maybe someone had too much chocolate, or maybe they really didn't like the idea of those giant Easter bunnies breeding too much. Local newspapers calling it the most unhoppy Easter ever. Meanwhile, over in the UK, elections were held recently and the alternative parties have stormed ahead. For 100 years now, politics in the UK has been dominated by Labour and Tories, with the Lib Dems in third place as the only other real option. Lib Dems actually were in a coalition with the Conservatives 10 years ago now. Yeah, I think it was during the 2008 crisis. That's the only taste of governance that they've seen. But now there's a few new challenges have emerged. The Greens, who are pro-immigration, pro-diversity, pro-green energy, pro-EU, and who are slightly left of Labour. Then Reform, who is Nigel Farage, who famously was involved with the Brexit side of things. They're more restrained on immigration, more focused on integration, restrictive on diversity, anti-EU, and right to the Conservatives. And there's also the Restore Party, Rupert Lowe, who's heading that, which is a relatively new party. They're much stricter on immigration, more anti-diversity, more anti-EU, and right of the Conservatives. So Reform were the biggest winners, going from 2 seats up to 1,454, which is a substantial increase. And the Greens were the next biggest gainers, picking up 440 seats, up to 587. So, yeah, a good five-fold increase there. Restore, being a relatively new party, they only fielded 10 candidates, but they won all their seats by a substantial margin. In fact, Rupert Lowe went on to X and also said that if they had only gotten half the votes, they would have still won in those areas. Meanwhile, the two political parties saw a substantial loss of voters. Labour are the party currently in power nationally. They lost 60% of their support, dropping from nearly 2,500 seats down to just over 1,000, losing Wales almost entirely. And the Conservatives, they were the party that were previously in power, due to the gross dissatisfaction of voters, actually gave Labour a huge majority in the last elections. They lost 40% more of their voters this time round. And yeah, so Liberal Democrats also picked up some seats, beating the Conservatives to third place in that regard. So yeah, things are changing, as I say. These are still local elections, so it doesn't necessarily reflect the national view, but it certainly gives us a taste of the national mood at the moment. The fallout has already started with two ministerial aides and a junior minister quitting, and a number of Labour MPs have been calling for the resignation of Keir Starmer. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, she has also made calls for him to step down, and Wes Streeting has also reportedly told the PM that he's ready to be the next leader. One interesting driver of this seems to be that people's disenfranchisement with the establishment politics. Every Labour politician has, or every Labour Prime Minister has been a prominent member of the Fabian Society, and over 140 Labour MPs are also members. The Fabian Society was established over 100 years ago and has been an integral part of Labour, the Labour Party, since its inception. It advocates for its own changes through small, incremental movements that are almost undetectable to the regular viewer. In fact, until recently, its mascot has been one of a wolf in sheep's clothing, which provides no ambiguity for their intentions. That was changed recently because of the optics, and they weren't looking so good. So, understandable change there, especially given current online presence. There's been a fairly sustained online campaign highlighting this group's subversive tactics, and voters are becoming all too aware of the impact these secret societies are having on everyday people. It comes back to something Scott Adams would say: when you have a large group of people with very little oversight and control of huge amounts of power, corruption is never really far away. Keir Starmer has announced that he's not resigning after such a dismal election. Really, there's no incentive for him to call an election because Labour currently have a majority. It would take something extraordinary for him to do so. So Labour is likely to be completely decimated in the next elections, but unless there's a war or something that starts, maybe 2 years from now, Labour will be out of power. So we'll see. Staying in the UK, and this is some news from Ground News, British Steel is set to be nationalised, Starmer says. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer announced on Monday that legislation will be introduced this week to take full national control of British Steel, following failed commercial negotiations with their current owner, Chinese group Xingye. Nationalisation is not an end goal, Starmer noted, but must serve the beginning of a clear and credible long-term plan for British Steel, with government investment for sector modernisation. So, the UK steel industry has been in steady decline for decades, suffered the same fate that many of the other industrial sectors have, where it's all been shipped away to other countries. Currently, there are only 4 remaining sites, and one actually, fully operationally producing steel. That's Scunthorpe, which is the only remaining steel furnace steel blast plant available. Xingye announced that its closure because it was losing over £700,000 a day, which is about $1 million a day. Skingrove and Teesside are 2 other steel plants in the same group, but they just create products from that raw steel. They don't actually create the virgin steel itself. There is another steel consortium that grew pretty rapidly in the late 2010s. The Alliance/Liberty Steel Group also own another 3 steel plants in the UK, in Rotherham, Stockbridge and Brinsworth. The problem there is that all of these sites are currently mothballed due to the owners of those plants linked to corruption or linked to the corrupted or controversial Gupta family being embroiled in fraud and corruption charges or allegations. This is the same family that was controversially involved with corruption allegations in South Africa a decade prior to that. So the collapse of the company in 2021 triggered investigation by the Serious Fraud Office, and it's unlikely that will be resolved anytime soon. No steel has actually been produced from those sites for more than 2 years now. It's really quite a sad time for a once great industry, especially in the UK. Sheffield was known as the Steel City, and it was widely known for its high-quality steel, and it produced 85% of the UK steel at one point, back in the 1850s. Now it produces very little. A few token knife and fork sets and some specialised alloy businesses, but nothing near the old greatness that it had. Back in the 70s, UK production peaked at 28 million tonnes, and today it makes less than 10% of that. And the fact that the Chinese owners were not able to make the numbers work as a private entity should probably tell you everything that you need to know. The rest of the infrastructure became owned by some pretty questionable businessmen is another part of the story. And bear in mind that there was no shortage of controversy in South Africa about them at the time. The UK government would have been well aware of the problems that these new sites, of the owners that these new sites were being taken over by. So, yeah, it's simply that these industries cannot exist in the UK without government handouts at the moment. They just can't compete on price. Steel requires an enormous amount of energy to produce, and the UK is one of the most expensive countries in the world for energy at the moment. If you add to that the high labour cost, it'll be very difficult for it to become independent again. It'll require a huge amount of investment for that to happen. And then, the taxpayers will never make their money back on that. It'll have to be sold at a loss. On a lighter note, still from ground news, on Monday, Sir Rod Stewart congratulated King Charles at the King's Trust's 50th anniversary celebration in London, praising the monarch's recent state visit to the Americas and his handling of President Donald Trump. Stewart's remarks referenced King Charles's 4-day visit to the US last month, during which the King addressed Congress on topics including NATO, support for Ukraine, and the collapse of critical natural systems. Applauding the trip, the 81-year-old singer told the King, "You were superb, absolutely superb. Put that little rat bag in his place," while the Rolling Stones guitarist Ronnie Wood just watched the interaction. While King Charles appeared to laugh off the comment, the event continued at the Royal Albert Hall, with presenters Ant McFarlane and Declan Connolly hosting the evening celebrations. So, yeah, I'm not sure what state visit Rod saw, but it looked very much more amicable to me than what he describes. Trump has his flaws, but calling him a rat bag is probably a little too much, especially to put the King in that position at a public event like that. I also wouldn't describe the UK as superb at the moment. Possibly a little bit of pot calling the kettle black there. Now over to DC, where there's an new arcade game satirizing the Iran War There's an arcade game satirizing the Iran War appears at a DC War memorial. On Monday, the activist group Secret Handshake installed 3 fully functional arcade cabinets featuring the satirical game Operation Epic Furious Straight to Hell at the District of Columbia War Memorial. The group created this game to satirize the administration of President Donald Trump for promoting military strikes in Iran by intersplicing real combat footage with clips from Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty. Players navigate as Trump, engaging in furious tweet battles against figures like the Pope, DEI, and an Iranian schoolgirl, while attempting to collect oil and Truth Social post ideas. I've included this one because I'm a big fan of gaming, and I haven't really had many stories in the chat yet about it, but this kind of seemed to cross the divide a little bit. It's kind of funny. Obviously it's just a bit of tongue-in-cheek, but I'm pretty sure that some people think that they're being serious with this as well. So, yeah, good use of resources. Anyway, that brings me to the end of my notes and leaves me with the final thought. And what I'll say is go find a game that you enjoy. Playing any kind of game is one way to keep the brain active, way more than passively watching TV, for example. You have to engage and challenge yourself to understand the rules enough that you can overcome the challenges in it. It can be a physical or virtual game. It doesn't really matter. Physical is obviously much more beneficial for your body, but any game will challenge the mind. It can also help you switch off from the day, de-stress a little bit, and even make some new friends if you can play it socially. And with that, I shall bid you well and say, see you later. Cheers.